Hey, this is Antonio Garcia. Welcome to this episode on All Things LOCS. I have the privilege of bringing in Arielle Cohen alongside my partner, Dan Neissany. And she is a co-founder of Marketing 411, and she's a CMO of Business 411, where they work in scaling and developing roofing companies from all over the country. It's really awesome. I'm actually really excited about this one because you are considered to be like the roofing marketing guru. Is that? I feel like you've been pinned that quite a bit lately. Is that true?
I appreciate that. Yeah, definitely welcome that title.
I love it. I love it. So let's kind of dive right into this, especially on the marketing front. There seems to be like a status quo of marketing, but there's also this state of the art new things that are happening in marketing. Where's like that proper balance, and like how do you view marketing and where it is today?
Yeah, so no matter what industry you're in, marketing is growing and it's changing and it's adapting based on what's happening. And so, marketing is something really you have to be dynamic with and on the lookout for what's happening, what kind of trends are going on, because if you don't, you'll kind of get left behind. And what's happening is you'll see other businesses start to grow and you'll kind of miss the boat. So you always want to be on top of marketing and kind of what's trending. Right now, there's a lot of cool things happening in the marketing space that businesses, entrepreneurs, any type of industry could really, really benefit from. One of those is going to be the use of AI in marketing and how it's helping actually fuel companies forward. It's making all of our lives easier and our marketing better. So that's a trend that we're going to continue to see it. It's not going anywhere, and it's something definitely to pay attention to.
When you're saying that, um, stay on top of it, right? If I were to tell like certain people in my family, like, hey, stay on top of economic trends, stay on top of this geopolitical thing. It's like the first thing is, how do I do that? Where do I begin? So when you're telling a business owner, hey, with marketing, it's this evolving space, stay on top of it. What should they do specifically?
Well, there's a couple different things. You really have to know your role as well. As a business owner, you're not always a marketer, right? So it's you can do it if that's what interests you and that's what's the best use of your time. Or the best route is to pay someone who can be on top of it, right? That is on your team that you can leverage. And that's really, you want to leverage as much as you can as a business owner in order to grow, not do everything yourself. It's going to be impossible to stay up to date on everything. So I would say leveraging someone else who could be that person for you is going to be the best. But for those starting out who don't have that type of leverage or don't have that person in their corner, you just really have to be involved in marketing groups, read different news articles, subscribe to newsletters, so that people who are up to date in the industry are keeping you updated. Essentially, there's things like YouTube where you can really see people posting about what's going on, what kind of technologies they're using in marketing, and that would be one way to kind of keep up with what's going on. You don't need to implement everything because then it becomes overkill, but you just kind of need to know what's happening in the landscape.
I want to come back in a second to like building out a team, so to speak, but what are just some of the biggest misconceptions regarding marketing? And then what are some of the biggest maybe pain points you have, so to speak, with business owners in the way that they approach marketing?
Ooh, those are really great questions. And so we've worked with thousands of businesses, so we have a lot of kind of data points on this and what we see. Some misconceptions I would say is that it's an instant solution or that it's a quick result. And that's not the case. Marketing relies a lot on building a brand and establishing a presence, and that does not happen overnight. So, one of the analogies I use is like think of marketing like the stock market, right? The stock market day by day can shift. It can go up, it can go down, right? You have good days, bad days in the stock market, but overall you're looking for that growth. It might be year over year, week by week, month by month, right? Even though there's up days and down days. And I kind of take that same approach when you're looking at marketing. That's how you should look at it. Are you growing over the long period of time? You can't wait years to see growth. I'm not saying sit back and wait. You got to be tracking, but there's going to be good days and bad days. It's very natural in marketing, but what you're looking for is that month over month growth. Now, a lot of pain points I see for people is not understanding actually the lead intake process. I can't tell you how many things go missed from the marketing to the sales side, right? So marketing and sales go hand in hand in any business, whether that's someone who's just booking the appointment, the customer service side. But what happens is we bring in leads through marketing. That was the whole goal. But there's a drop off from the ones who get brought in to actually scheduling that appointment. It's like if they don't answer the phone the first time, a lot of people give up. they look the other way and they miss that lead entirely. And to me, as a business owner, that's lost money. Every lead is an opportunity. And if you miss those leads, you're losing money essentially for your business.
Yeah, so it's like you're trying to amplify your business, and it's like, oh, can you get me more leads? It's like, well, what's happening with the ones that I'm already bringing to you, right? It's like, are you converting them? Are you maximizing it, so to speak? Because I do feel like there's a lot of business owners, they're just constantly chasing, more and more marketing spend to get more leads, and it's like, what are you doing with the ones that you're getting? Which I think is something that people kind of, fall off on. One of the things I wanted to ask you too was, in a crowded market, whether it's for roofing or maybe in healthcare, I'm very interested to know like what your thoughts are, what businesses can do in terms of like Google searching, right? It's like we all use the same terms. Like if I'm a physical therapy clinic, it's only so many phrases I can use to track patients. So what is a good approach that any business or one in healthcare should take when they're trying to just maximize their marketing spend, having the ability to not use so many words, so to speak, on a Google search?
Yeah, so there's so much you can do, especially in the healthcare space. As you guys both know, I've worked with a lot of different medical facilities and practices before being in roofing, so I have a lot of experience there as well. And I'll tell you, Google is still a very high priority because people, when they have an issue or are looking for a doctor, they're immediately going on Google and searching for that person. And so there's a lot of different things you can leverage on Google by trying to be relevant for different keywords, and it's a process that takes time. That is still 100% a strategy that works, that you need to, as a practice, as a business owner, as a doctor, as a manager, you need to make sure you are investing into. And then I think a lot of people miss looking at the competitive landscape, and not in a bad way, not in a like, oh, I'm trying to steal from competitors, but what is the other practices or the other businesses that are competing with you in the area? What are they doing? What platforms are they on? How often are they posting? When I search on Google, are they showing up? If so, how many reviews do they have, right? How many different things they're doing and what they're doing, and you could use that as your benchmark. For example, if the competing business across the street has 500 reviews and I have 100, well, what's my goal? It's not going to be to get 150. Why? Because I'm still short. They have 500.
Yeah.
My goal is 501, right? I want to be above what they're doing. And so just benchmarking the competitors or the other people in the landscape, the other businesses, can go a long way.
I want to circle back around to one thing that you said, because it's which is the lead intake process, and then the issues that can happen if that thing is underperforming or it's substandard going into sales, because that drop off and that handoff can be impacted quite significantly. Mm-hmm. These are tough conversations sometimes to have with an organization, with a business, where it's like, hey, me as an agency or me as a CMO, I'm doing my job and I am delivering on quality leads, but they're not converting, or this isn't happening because you've given up. You're not dialing in a like speed to lead, right? That particular KPI. For other CMOs or other agencies that might be running into that issue, where it's like we're holding up our end of the bargain. We're giving you what you're needing, but these conversions are falling flat, not because of us, but because of this. So how do you have those tough conversations, and how do you handle those as a CMO talking to another business?
Yeah, definitely handle it with caution. But as a CMO, I'm going to tell you this right now. No one can argue with data, right? So these types of decisions and conversations, they're not emotionally driven. We're on the same team. We want the same goal. That's why I'm pointing this out to you. Hey, these are the data, these are the metrics, these are the industry standards of what conversion rates need to happen at what part of the process, and here's where we're falling short. Let's work together or work with that department to find a solution. And it's all about being solution driven and basing it off the data, not off of emotion.
Absolutely. When you run into that, and I'm only seeing kind of how you not necessarily handle it, but this is where I see a lot of marketers or agency owners, they start bleeding into a little bit of scope creep sometimes, where like now that business is like, all right, cool, we're giving you leads, we're working on the marketing, doing all that stuff. You just said like, hey, I'm going to show you the data, and we're trying to do this together. And then the business owner is like, can you help me with that? Can you go above and beyond that? Can you help me fix this? And now it's going outside of your purview. I see that happen actually quite a bit. I'm curious how you not only do you handle that, but what's your perspective on that generally?
On the scope creep side of things?
Yeah. I mean, I know Dan and I, we've actually worked with an agency before in the past where it's like one is like, hey, I'll kind of help on this front, and then another agency is like, hey, that's outside of what I'm supposed to do. You guys figure it out.
I almost appreciate when people say, like, it's better to be upfront too about what they're doing versus what they're not doing. So when you're working with an agency partner, you're going to have some agencies who really do encompass most of what you need, right? That's primarily what people are looking for. And then you're going to have agencies who specialize in something very specific, like, hey, I don't touch anything else but email marketing. Email marketing is the thing we know best. It's what we get results in. That's all we can do. But it's better to have that communication up front of what the scope of work looks like and what they can actually handle. And that way, you know, kind of what do we expect output and input? What do you need from us? And what do we expect output wise from you? What's trending now is that people want to work with an all-in-one solution, right? They want someone who could do 90% of the work. That's the benefit of working with an agency compared to bringing someone in-house. Bringing someone in-house, it's called a unicorn. When you could find someone who could do everything in marketing, it's pretty hard to find. So that's why the benefit is, and why we see a lot of companies trending to working with agencies, because, for example, myself, I have a content writer, I have a PPC specialist, I have a Facebook specialist, right? Like, I have people who specialize in those areas, and when you hire an agency, you get all of those specialists instead of trying to find just one who could fit into the business. And so that's sometimes the benefit and why people look to outsource.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that real quick. How does one find the right marketing partner? How would you describe that?
Oh, that is such a great question. It's actually something I get asked all the time. And there's a couple things I recommend when you're looking for someone to work with. It is a true partnership, right? Because you're investing in them. You're trusting that they're going to deliver, and they're investing their time into you as well, right? So it's kind of goes both ways. They're going to ask you for things that they need, materials or resources or content, right? They need you to deliver upon, and then you're expecting them to deliver upon the result that you guys discussed and the marketing that you guys discussed. Finding someone that's a good partner, one, you have to obviously feel it. It has to feel like it's good. They have the same kind of enthusiasm you have, or they have some of the same core values that you have. I think that's really important. But making sure that they've done work in your industry. That is the most important, right? Like, if someone was to hire me now, although I have a lot of experience working with dental and different practices, fertility, I can keep going on, right? I've chosen to specialize now in roofing. So if someone comes to me for a medical practice, I'm not going to take that on because that's not what I specialize in anymore, right? So it's important you find someone who actively knows what's happening in your industry and has industry experience, case studies they can show you from others in the industry, because that tells us that they know what's happening and they're not learning using your budget. You do not want someone learning and testing ideas on your dime.
How does it work when you're, you're working with a company and they're maybe just trying to shift their messaging? Maybe it's like that healthcare practice that's just been kind of pumping out like generic stuff that they kind of do. And now they're like, hey, we want to get a little bit more specific and, maybe a little bit more emotionally resonant material. It's like, how do you actually make that shift? And then how important is it for them to look overall at their whole brand across every single platform to start identifying, are we being consistent, and where do we need to maybe make some changes there?
Definitely. That's like a brand audit, right? It's where you look through everything and see where the messaging lines up. And then from the leadership team, you need your marketing person to go ahead and develop that strategy for you guys. And leadership needs to approve that they agree with the messaging and the route that you're going to take. But ultimately, talking about just like the different products or services, you really have to find what your star players are. And by star players, I mean your star services, right? So is there one service that you're the most profitable on in your practice? Or is there one, type of offering you have that if you get that offering in, they'll use other services by you, right? And you really focus your messaging to that specific service, to that star player of what you're trying to get more of.
Now, when a organization is trying to put together a marketing plan, like you had mentioned getting an all-in-one agency, you have a smaller business and they're just starting out, they don't have the capital per se. And it's like, all right, I'm going to maybe do what I think a lot of entrepreneurs start out as. I'm the marketing person, I'm the salesperson, I'm kind of building it out. What would you say is like a good approach? I know you talked at the very beginning about AI, but like what is a good approach that somebody who's a little bit on the smaller side can start to do to start gaining some traction before they're at the point where they can bring on an agency?
Definitely. Yeah. So when you're first starting out, I've been there before, you wear all the hats, right? You're doing
Right.
everything from the sales to the fulfillment to running the marketing strategies. You're the face maybe at times, and you don't have that luxury of being able to outsource just yet or bring on certain team members for things. It's important that you understand like what's driving the revenue because that's really where the focus will be. So if marketing and sales are driving the revenue, then that's where you want to pay your, the most attention to. But honestly, using things like ChatGPT or whatever AI tool you use, even at the most fundamental, basic level, could provide marketing insights that someone like myself, a CMO, would suggest to you. So I would say just leverage those free tools to actually break down a plan of action, a go-to-market strategy, exactly what you should be doing, and don't try to figure it all out. You can maybe even hire someone to teach you, right? That's not as expensive as hiring an agency. That will still get you, the results of what you need to do to move forward in the company.
So I love that. You know, when I look at marketing, it's like an interesting hybrid because it's kind of where like art and science meet. Like when you look at a marketing department, it might as well just be legal because it's so vast. Like, are we talking about the analytics and data driven side of marketing? Are we looking at the kind of the creative side of marketing? It feels like as your business grows that you might want to start integrating different people that are leaning in one way or the other. What's your opinion on that, kind of generally speaking?
Oh my gosh, you hit it so like right in the perfect spot because
Pow
marketing is this
pow!
huge
Got it.
umbrella. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was like boom, 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 right there. Like it is a huge umbrella, and there's so many different areas of marketing that you can kind of go after and focus on. And I think it's really important to identify what you're missing that's going to get you to that next point, and that's where you need to focus. And it's not always the same thing for every company. It's just what's next? What's the next step? But I think what a lot of people do is they look at marketing as a whole. And I just gave a speech about this actually to a room full of 100 roofers yesterday, that everyone talks about being omnipresent. Omnipresence. Oh, you got to be everywhere. But for a startup or someone who's just starting out, that's not really realistic.
Mhm.
So what I suggest you do is you go all in. Pick one thing that you're good at, like whether it's one platform, one target audience, one core star service that you're going to focus on, and go all in on that. And that alone could get you to a really nice revenue place before you start doubling down and expanding out. But I think what happens if you try to do too much of everything, unless you have the resources, disposable resources, you got to really hone in and focus on what you need.
That's I'd love to kind of continue on that train of thought because when you're allocating resources from business to business, there's different models and formulas that could work. Some people, they go off of flat percentages, or they go off of percentages, they go off of net, they go off of gross, they go off of just like flat rates. What do you recommend companies do? And how can someone run like maybe a self-analysis on like, hey, for my business, I need to go 10% of gross right into marketing?
Yeah, so there's generally best practices, like from a financial standpoint of how much you should invest into marketing. Generally speaking, usually it's anywhere between 5 to 15% across most industries that you'll find of what you need to invest into marketing. I think another thing is just outsourcing. A lot of people, when they're now speaking to those who are starting up, is getting an assistant. It could be a marketing assistant, but someone who's taking those low entry tasks off your plate and helping assist. Like there's no reason why, in my opinion, the business owner needs to be posting on social media. It's something that someone for under $10 an hour outsourced can do for you, and you could now focus on more important things that are going to drive the business forward.
Doesn't that just drive you absolutely off the wall that when you're talking to a business owner and it's like 3 hours a day, like they're paying themselves a $200,000 a year salary, and then 3 hours a day they're literally just doing copy and writing it themselves and uploading it to like LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram, and you're looking at them like, dude, this is like $8 an hour work if you had a VA, and you could do more profit producing activities elsewhere, but they just don't want to release it. I'm sure you've had kind of those conversations and those before, yeah?
Oh, definitely. That's why I actually help people with finding VAs for that very reason. And it was a problem I struggled with personally. That's how I know, because I was operating a multi 7-figure company, still doing little things like that. And I said, I have to cut it or else I'm always going to remain the same. I'm not going to have freedom. I'm not going to have growth because I'm sitting over here doing a social media post that I don't need to be doing. I could teach a team to do. And now I'm at the point, where there'll be posts sometimes that my team, they know what I like. They'll post it. I haven't even watched the video. I haven't even seen what they posted. I'm not even looking, right? And that's true delegation right there.
Yeah.
That's true outsourcing right there.
I feel like he was talking about me.
Yeah. Never.
No, I know. No, you talked a little bit about metrics. So, like, what are some things that when somebody's spending, they're spending their hard-earned capital on marketing, they have ideally some outcomes they're going after. But how are they, like, some things that they can look at to say, like, how do I know if it's really working, or how could I make this more beneficial? And like, what are some metrics that you would think business owners should pay attention to when it comes to marketing that they typically don't?
Yes, definitely going to give you some of the key metrics I would tell anyone to look out for when doing marketing. Obviously, you're going to keep track of the total spend, how much you're spending on marketing. From there, you're going to also want to know, like, if you're advertising, your cost per lead. So how much are you paying per lead that comes into the business? You're also going to want to look at, if you have that information, cost per acquisition. So how much is it actually costing to acquire that new customer? Sometimes things like cost per click are just a little bit relevant just to have a glance at what's going on, but I care more about the cost per lead and cost per acquisition. And then what you're also looking at is the booking rate. The booking rate and the close rate. Those are the important metrics. So if I had to break it down, those would be like the 5 that I would really look into.
Do you, when you're sitting down with a company and they're giving some expectations, like, hey, I want to get 50 clients a month, like, do you have discussions based around, like, the unknown, so to speak? Like, I can't guarantee anything. And is it more the focus on the metrics themselves to kind of show, hey, the campaign's working, we'll just make some adjustments? Or how do you typically have those conversations? I do feel like that's a little bit of a sticking point where it's like, you guaranteed 100 people a month and only getting 60, and it's like, shit,
200 by this weekend.
Yeah,
Do
it's
it or
like,
you suck.
kind of like shot yourself in the foot. So I'm just kind of curious to know how you have those conversations.
Actually, that goes back to the original question you asked about how do you find the right person to work with. And to anyone listening who's thinking about hiring an agency, if someone promises you something like that, that would be a red flag for me, because I know for a fact most people can't deliver on that. Just because all marketing companies, we don't own Google, we don't own Facebook, and while we may have really great strategies, they can vary city to city. And that's why it's important to have someone who knows your industry and has some experience, because there's a better shot they will hit that target. The next thing is actually, what is that target? So of course, any company is going to come in and say, you know what, I want 1,000 leads, I want 100 leads, I want 200 leads. It's easy to say that, but what we do on the intake is we actually say, okay, what would it take budget-wise to get that amount of leads that you want? And we base the amount of leads they would need off of their desired revenue and their closing rate. Because I can give you 200 leads, but then if your closing rate is terrible or your booking rate's terrible, you're not going to hit the goal. You're not going to see what you want to see in the results. So we, in all of the intake, we ask, what's the revenue goal? What's the close rate? And we reverse engineer how many leads they would need to hit that revenue based on their close rate. And then we could associate a budget with it.
So, here's, I'm kind of reading in between the lines on one thing, and it's about being burned. So you kind of mentioned, like, an entrepreneur just gets started, they're working on their business, they're wearing a lot of hats, they're learning as they go, they're trying to learn from YouTube, from ChatGPT, some friends, maybe they hire somebody out, and then they start working with somebody, and they kind of they get burned, right? They spent a lot of money. It went nowhere. They went with another agency, spent a lot of money. It went nowhere. And many people do kind of have this bad taste in their mouth sometimes, where it feels like, dude, marketing is just a bunch of snake oil. I'm going to stick to just doing what I'm doing, not really going to grow my business, because they kind of gave up on marketing and finding the right partner. How do you get over that? And what kind of, I know you've had like those types of conversations with business owners. Like what's kind of that like too as well?
It's really hard because we have to break this bad stigma against marketing and that they've been screwed before. I would say 90% of people I talk to, they always have a story about, well, I'm a little hesitant because I've been, had a bad experience. And bad experiences typically come down to miscommunication, a lack of communication, or lack of results. It's always lack of results or lack of communication. Those are the two things that, sometimes things are, so how we combat that is being honest. I don't make false promises. I turn away people if I feel like I can't deliver or that we're not the right fit. So we have certain criteria that's really important. I'm making sure I'm a fit for them and that they're a fit for me because I want longevity. I want a good relationship. I want a good reputation more than I want anything else. And so having that mindset is really important. And for people who are just out there and trying to find someone, that's why I said you really have to have the same core values as somebody that you're going to partner with, who you kind of have the same understanding and you feel aligned, and there's no false promises. If anyone throws out numbers, it's usually a red flag because they usually can't back it up. So it's a hard stigma to kind of overcome, but I think with transparency and good communication, just to be clear, guys, means even when things aren't going well, we share, hey, listen, we're aware. This isn't, we're not getting the desired results, but here's what we're doing to try to combat that. Because you're not gonna hit a home run every time. You're just not.
Do you see a shift happening with that? Like, I'll use kind of car sales from years ago. Is that now there's far more sophisticated buyers when they're buying like a vehicle, for example. Do you feel like there's a shift happening with business owners that like now they're a little bit more sophisticated? They are learning marketing much better, and therefore they're making better decisions. Are you seeing that shift happening, or do you see like a lot of folks just being stuck? And is that industry specific, or is that across the board?
Yeah, I hope we continue to move to more people being educated, at least from a high level, so that you know how to make decisions, right, for your company, to drive your company forward. You don't need to know the ins and outs. I think that's one mistake actually people make, is it's good to be educated and know how to build a team or run a team of marketers, but you don't need to know how to actually do it to be successful at just understanding the metrics and the data. And what happens is with marketing is there's so many different people who are so knowledgeable in marketing, and there's so many different ways to get to the same place. Okay, so there's so many different ways to get to the same result that some people share their ways and then they think that's the only way. Mm-hmm. And so they're, oh, well, what about, are you doing this? Are you doing that? Like, yes, we are. You don't have to, we are doing that. There's different ways to get to the same result. So just understanding marketing as a whole. But as a business owner who's not looking to be a marketer, if you're looking to be a marketer, great, keep learning. But if you're not, and you're just really trying to grow a business, just know the key metrics and data and what you need to get out of your team.
When you're crafting marketing, like you said, there's so many different aspects of marketing. I feel like it's a bad term because, like you said, it's email, social media, this and that. But when you're crafting the messaging, how important is it to actually understand like some component of human psychology and just the way people think, especially as it relates to just the phrasing of copy and ads and things like that?
Yeah, I'm so happy you touched on that. The psychology part, I almost wish like I had a minor in psychology, just to understand people more and more, because when you're speaking to them, there is that psychology of certain terminology and words that we test that all the time in ads. So you'll have the same ad or different versions of the same copy or the same content where you'll switch it up to kind of test what is getting people to convert. And that's all about the psychology component. I think one of the big things we're seeing in advertising in general, a couple different things. On Facebook, you have to remember on social media, people aren't going there looking for a dentist, looking for a doctor, looking for a roofer, right? They're not. They're just not. So you have to make sure, okay, does this content, are you being too salesy or too marketing type? Does this look like an ad, or does it look more organic? We're seeing that the more organic type content is actually converting better, right? Than me trying to say, hey, I'm a roofer looking to sell you a new roof, right? So that type of positioning, and that by being in the industry, by actually running ads, you get those data points and you start to see what works versus what doesn't work. And then the other thing when it comes to Google or your website or landing pages is if you're advertising on Google, and let's just say we're doing let's just say it's fertility treatment, okay? You want to make sure that the ad, that if you're trying to come up for the word fertility treatment, that term, that the ad actually has that same language. Don't go talking about something else. You want the keywords to match. And then if you drive them to a landing page, again, you want it to talk to that person about that same service. You don't want to switch it up and bring them to somewhere general. So you want to be really intentional.
So at what point can the messaging maybe get too confusing, or it's just like it's too technical and a person maybe could like read it like, I don't really know like what this actually is going to do for me? Like, how do you deal with that aspect?
Yeah. Too many terms, too many focuses. That's why I said, have your star player, focus on building that out, and then you could replicate it for your other star services that you have. That would be one thing that I would recommend you can do.
I'd like to pivot over to culture. I think when you look at a legal department, like for a big company or even for a smaller company, there's a certain atmosphere in a legal department. There's a certain atmosphere with your sales. What is the right atmosphere for marketing, where you are going back to what we said, like balancing that art and science, where you're nimble enough, but you're very data driven? Walk us through like when you walk into a business and you're looking at their marketing team, you're like, they got it or they don't got it here. What's that look like?
I mean, results are going to speak for themselves, right? So if they have results, I'm telling them don't change anything, right? If it's working, I'm not going to try to fix what's not broken, essentially. But I do like a healthy balance between creative and technical, like data driven. I think those two combinations together could be really good. But when someone's too creative with no data driven decisions and they're just going fully on creative, right? That could be like a little bit of a missing a gap there, or vice versa. If someone's too focused on data but doesn't have someone who could actually create and spin out new ideas and different variations, they kind of just get stuck on the data and they don't try anything new.
I'm sure that's kind of tough as a business owner when you're new and you're looking at your team and you're trying to go in-house, like maybe you've outsourced for a while. Is there a time where you recommend people or companies they've been outsourcing, they started outsourcing, and now they're bringing it in-house? What's that look like? Like when do you recommend that as a smart move for a company?
Definitely. So when you're bringing someone in-house, you're going to start with either a couple different roles, like maybe some sort of marketing manager or some sort of CMO, depending on how big the company is. I would not necessarily, it really depends on the company and what their focus is on at what revenue point or what growth point you should bring in someone in-house. It just has to make sense from a couple of different, from different standpoints of the business. But I would say that CMO or that marketing manager, here's the thing, they're not going to be able to do everything, but they can oversee it enough to make sure it's growing the business. And you might still at that point have a couple of things outsourced, but instead of it reporting to you, it now filters through that person, that manager, that CMO, who can go ahead and guide it in the right direction on your behalf and just report the numbers to you. So I would think that's the first kind of change, because it's very hard to find, I would say, a unicorn, someone who could do email marketing, create a great graphic, run a Facebook ad, do PPC, run SEO effectively in all of those areas. Most people don't know how to do all of them.
How rare is that? Is that like 1 out of 10, 1 out of 100? Would you say like, dude, for every 1,000 people that come in, one of them is a solid unicorn? What's that?
Yeah, I don't know the ratio, but it is hard to find. Those are usually the CMOs, or you have someone really good who can lead a team, who just knows what to look for out of those people, how to get those people, who can do each of those different things. It's hard to find a unicorn. That's why so many people work with agencies, because even if they did find a unicorn, they wouldn't know the first thing about managing them or how to communicate with them, because they don't speak the same language. And so that's why I said one of the best things you could do as a business owner is you don't need to know the technicals of marketing. You just need to know how to work with and oversee a team or a manager who does marketing.
I wanted to get your opinion on one thing. So I forgot where the stat is, but in Fortune 500 companies, the life cycle of a CMO is about 18 months, 12 to 18 months.
Wow.
That it's almost like musical chairs, where so one of my clients runs a media studio company, and they built out like a brand syndicate. So they've had people from like large liquor brands to car brands, and it's like musical chairs constantly. What's your opinion on that? On why that's constantly happening, where CMOs on that level, it's literally like hot potato.
Wow. I guess it's no different than agencies then. I didn't know that statistic. It's very interesting. I would say it's misalignment, and it's going to come down to two things. Same thing with an agency. It's going to be lack of communication, like miscommunication, or lack of results. It's those very two things.
I want to shift a little bit. What did it take for you, because you have your own business, what did it take for you to not just build a business, but like you said, you have people who are all in the same industry but different skill sets. So I'm just curious to know, like, what was the biggest thing that enabled you to kind of build that team together, where we're working together at a high level? We all have our different little niches, so to speak, and just kind of, if you can run that through a little bit for us.
Definitely. Yeah. So like any business owner would do, you look at where any, where there's any holes in the business, any gaps, what's something we need that we're missing right now in order to be able to fulfill for our clients, deliver a better service, a better product, to be able to grow. And so based on that, we'll hire for what we think we need specialists in. And so I was very intentional about who we hired and when we hired them. So for example, for a very long time, we didn't do Facebook. We only stuck to Google. Google was kind of what we did for our clients. Anything on Google we would handle. Now we service also Facebook. We built out that team, but we didn't have that originally because we chose kind of our lane and stuck with those specialists. And now we've expanded where we have it. We have it all. So I think it really just depends. The reason why we expanded was our clients told us what they wanted. So I listened to what the customers wanted, what the market wanted, and I saw the rising costs on Google and said, okay, I see where this is trending. We need to offer an alternative option, and that option is offering social media. And then I built a team of people who specialize in social media. So I really base things off of what the audience is telling us and what I know from looking at trends and what's happening, what we need in order to have forward movement. And that's what business owners, I feel, should always be focused on, is forward movement, however that may look in their industry.
I'm really impressed that you said that, because I do feel that's an aspect of business where a lot of business owners don't listen to their customers. Or, it's like you're getting the data of like, this is where we want to see you guys improve, and then they do nothing with it, or they don't get any data at all. And I really appreciate that. I mean, I know it's a big issue even with like Facebook and Instagram that I hear all the time from content creators. Like, we tell you what we want on your platform and you do the opposite. So I got to give you a lot of credit, because not a lot of people do that. How do you guys actually focus then on kind of that constant process of improvement? Like, what do you actually do to make sure, hey, I brought on great talent, we're building out something amazing here. How do we actually keep it going to make sure we're constantly evolving and getting better so we can serve our customer at a higher level?
Yeah, definitely. We're always so you're not going to have it perfect, right? You're never going to have it
Never.
perfect. People need to understand that. And you also cannot be afraid of change. That's a big thing, especially in marketing where things are always changing. If you're afraid of change and you do nothing, you will get left behind. It's only a matter of time. And so if you want your business to grow, you're stuck. You're forced to find a way to, to grow with it and adapt to the times. And so for us, there's things we look at, and those things are, now we have more of a business operating system. So we use like the stoplight reports where we're looking weekly at different department stats to make key decisions on, what's happening, what we need to adjust. We're just paying attention to the landscape of our industry and making pivotal adjustments based on that. There are times where we say, okay, you know what? Is this aligned with the direction we want to go? No? Okay, we won't offer that. But there's certain things that do, and we need to create a new process, and we can't be scared of that. What happens if you're scared is nothing, and you end up falling behind. And I would say that's one of the biggest things, is just you have to keep moving forward. And it's like everyone who was like, thought TikTok was like silly and dumb, and then the people who like really, like even the doctors, let's talk about the doctors. There are famous doctors because they were doing silly dances on TikTok. So who really got the last laugh?
Mm-hmm. I want to shift over to kind of mindset here. So I'm looking at you. You got dreads. You're like, you know what I mean? And, you're also in the roofing industry, right? And talk to us a little bit about, because we talked offline about this, on sometimes, and I hate to say it, like sometimes there's like a female entrepreneurship where they use a lot of conditions as a crutch to not pursue excellence, or they're not getting as far as they want. It seems like you leaned in the other direction. Talk to us about like the mindset of doing that, and what advice you'd give to other like female entrepreneurs or executives that it's just like, no, lean into your uniqueness.
100%. You're talking to the right person about that. It's about time you guys have someone with locks on your podcast.
Oh,
I've been
absolutely.
waiting.
I was like, we got it. We got to have the right time for this. I don't think people are ready for it, but yes.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I think you're touching on such an important topic where it's like people try to use things as like a poor me, why me, or a crutch. And I think that's something I've never done. I've never made excuses. And I don't care what that looked like. I never made excuses. It's you versus you. And that's really what I focus on. So a lot of times, like even back in my previous business, we raised money from investors. It's a room full of men, white men to be specific, right? I've worked with doctors where, certain personality types, right? They're older, more established at times, right? There's certain different things, and I've never ever let the way I look. I used it as an advantage. And someone actually just yesterday, this little 12, I think she was like 12 years old, was at our event with her dad, and she asked a very similar question. And or she said, I'm trying to sell these, people roofs, and I know I'm intimidated because all these men keep trying to sell, and I know they're more credible than I am. And I said, what makes them more credible than you? You don't think that all those homeowners are sick and tired of talking to the same male every single time? Like it's a breath of fresh air to get someone, a female, to talk to in the industry who's knowledgeable. So I've always this is my differentiator. Everyone knows me by who I am, and I've always believed in leaning into who I am and having confidence behind that. And I let my knowledge and my confidence speak for itself. And if anything, how I look and being a female is an asset to what I've done.
Where did that come from? Is that something that was developed over time? Was that like a book that you read, or was it upbringing? Tell us a little bit about where that mindset came from.
I would love to credit it to a certain book, but I don't, I do a lot of coaching. I'm always reinvesting in myself and learning, but I think it was something I was just brought up with mentally. My family's from New York. They're very, hard-headed and a little bit aggressive, that typical New York. And so it's like my grandpa raised me, you got to have thick skin. And that's exactly, if you're getting into business, you better be ready to have thick skin, because there's going to be good times and bad times, and you're going to lose out on partnerships and deals. You're going to get new ones, and it's an emotional roller coaster. And if you don't have thick skin, you're not going to be built out for it. And so I always knew I have to find a way no matter what. It's just always been inside of me to not let anything, make me miss my target. And so one thing I'll tell you is, and my grandpa taught me this, he was a typical sales guy from New York, but it's very important. If someone doesn't answer the front door, you keep knocking, you go to the back door, you go to the side door, you knock on the window, but you find a way in no matter what. And that's the mentality I have.
How important is it for you personally as a female entrepreneur to kind of get it out there that, I feel like there are a lot of women are insanely successful in business. And I think even I saw like a post that Kevin O'Leary put out yesterday. He's like 95% of businesses that crush it through Shark Tank are female owned, which I was like, it's just phenomenal. But then I feel like there's a lot of female owners who don't kind of put it out there when they're doing really great. But how important is that for you to really just advocate like, hey, it's like, I'm out here, I'm doing it, and I want to make sure that you understand like we're successful and it's not just the guys that are crushing it.
I don't pinpoint it like that. I really don't promote it like that. I just promote who I am and what I do. And, that's what comes with it. Being a business owner, it just comes with it. And so I've never looked at it like, well, I'm a female doing this. I don't even want to be looked at that way. I want to compete in the same landscape of everybody else and show I could still be number one.
That's kind of a little bit more in alignment of what kind of how I was raised too as well, is like I actually don't like the men versus women type thing. I actually really don't. Either you work hard or you don't. You have integrity or you don't. You're gritty or you're not. You're after it or you're making excuses. That's not a men or woman thing. That's just if you have that in you or not. And so I actually really, really like that it's that you're not looking at it as like I'm a female, therefore. It's like, no, I'm a business owner, therefore.
I love that. Yeah, exactly how I'm looking at it. Us business owners, we're all in the same landscape. I don't care where you come from, what your story is. We're all business owners, and we're all looking to be great.
Yeah. What are some lessons that in growing up, like Jewish family, New York, right? Like, what are some lessons or tips that you're like, I wish more business owners kind of had this? Like, if they kind of grew up with me a little bit and got these characteristics, they would actually be more successful.
So I would say the thick skin comment. Definitely.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Yeah.
That's really it. You got to power through. You can't be scared of the nose. You can't be too scared to move, to have forward movement. I see a lot of people who are out there and they want to do something and they've just been scared to do it. So knowing it's not going to be perfect, but the only way to learn is actually by doing it and not getting so emotional about every little thing, just keep going. Take it as a lesson. And those lessons are actually what are going to propel you forward ultimately. So I would say just have thick skin and just start. Just do it. It's not going to be perfect. You will figure it out as you go. I've sat down with companies, they have like literally $100 million companies, and I'm like, wow, they must have it so together. And I see their operation, and I'm like, holy cow, they have no idea what they're doing. No offense to them, right? Like they're just as chaotic as I am behind the scenes, let's just say, right? Like they don't have it as perfect as you think. So just do it and just let the results speak for themselves and keep having forward movement. Do not be scared, and you gotta just learn. You gotta learn to do it.
When you say taking forward movement, like what do you mean specifically? Like, you said you have the business that's maybe making like 8 or 9 figures, and you're like, they got their shit together, and then it's like, actually they don't. But what are some things as you're growing and you're, I feel like some people, they get that mentality of like, oh, I made it, and it's like, don't do that, please. Like, what needs to happen in a business owner's mentality or mindset for them to kind of keep going and making progress, and what does that actually look like?
It depends on what people want. Some people do hit a point where they're like, okay, I'm happy with this. I'm content. I don't work that much. I make great money. I'm fine with where I'm at. My focus is on my family. And I think that's a beautiful thing. You have to decide what you want for you. But for those of you who are hungry and you want to grow, you're in that growth stage, no matter what revenue point or team size that may look like, you have to take steps. What I'm talking about is the people who are too scared to move. And so I invest in real estate, for example. This is a great example. If anybody you talk to in business, if they're not invested in real estate, they're going to say something along the lines, for the most part, of, oh, I've always wanted to invest in real estate. And it's like, well, why didn't you? Because you were too scared, you didn't invest in yourself, you had no movement. If you would have invested 10 years ago, you would have hit your milestone already, but you didn't. And so for 10 years, you've been talking about investing in real estate and you just never did it. You never took that first step. And that's the type of forward movement I'm talking about. And so even when you're already an established business, there becomes a point, if you want to get to the next level, the same things that got you to where you're at now aren't going to get you to the next level. And you need to be aware of that and take forward movement to change.
Yeah, I love that. What's worked in the past doesn't always work for the future. And unfortunately, a lot of people kind of operate. It's like, hey, I've been doing this for 10 years, so just keep doing the same thing. It's like, do you know how much the world has changed in the last like 3 months? And you're working off a playbook from like 10 years ago.
So true.
For me personally, like there's a lot of kind of words of wisdom that I got from you. So it's like, don't be scared, continue moving, having thick skin, have that balancing act of like what your strengths are. So that way you can bring in pieces around you, outsourcing different pieces. If someone is watching this and they want to work with you, they have a roofing company, they want to they consult with you, what's the best way that someone can get in contact with you?
Definitely. So for roofing, you can go to marketing411.com or business411.com. We have 2 really great companies in the roofing space specifically. And then for anyone who's just a business owner, who's just looking to learn how to hire, outsource, build a team of VAs, different things like that, you could always connect with me on social media. My handle's Arielle, Arielle CEO on all social.
Arielle, thank you so much for joining us. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and it's really awesome to see someone like you just crushing it out there and making an impact, especially around marketing and roofing.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
I appreciate it. I'm so glad you guys had me on today.
Glad you made it.